I gotta get there. There we go. So today we're going to be learning a bunch of terminology and how to find some things on different functions. These are called the x-intercepts. They are the most important thing because they have four names. If they ask you for the roots, they're talking about these. If they ask you for the x-intercepts, they're talking about those. If they talk about the solutions, they're talking about this. And there's even one more name. X-intercepts, solutions, roots, and they're called the zeros of a function. These are called the zeros. All right, so those are the most important thing. Second most important thing is this vertex here, because there's only one spot on the whole function where it's at its lowest point. That's called the vertex. Right through the middle of that is this axis of symmetry, runs right down the middle of that. And if this was at the point 2 comma, wait, I should do this right. It's at 1 comma negative 4. Then pay attention here. If that is 1 comma negative 4, the vertex is the whole point, and the axis of symmetry is just the x of it. X equals 1. It just grabbed the x of it, and you can make the axis of symmetry. One of my kids from a different year said, so it's the axis of symmetry. And I was like, I kind of like that. The axis of symmetry, because it's always an x equals thing. The axis of symmetry is always an x equals. All right, so it's whatever's the x is. Well, let's go on to this page. Which one doesn't belong? Well, there's 2 upside down ones, 3 upside down ones, only 1 right side up one. In that way, this one doesn't belong because it's the only right side up one. Do you get that? But in a different way, only one of them is different. In a different way, one of the others could be considered the oddball. If you're not just looking at up and down, if you're looking at some other characteristic, then this is the oddball. Can you tell me why number 2 is actually the oddball? Yes?
Its size.
You're right. It's the smallest of them. Absolutely can't argue with that.
It's not all the way on.
It's not even really touching the lines yet. Good point. It doesn't have an x-intercept. Very good. See, this has an x-intercept. This has an x-intercept. This has an x-intercept. This one doesn't. Okay, so the point of this is there's a lot of ways to look at it. There's only one of you. You guys know that. If we keep it simple and say people who have hair, well, that's pretty much everybody. Okay, well, not everybody. Okay, but it's almost everybody. If we start subdividing down and we get to somebody who has your DNA, well, that's only you. We can get it down to just you. But if we divide them in simpler and simpler ways, like people that have, can't say just 2 legs, because there's going to be people that have only 1 leg. They've lost a leg along the way. Or maybe they were born with only 1 leg. Or maybe they were born with 0 legs. That happens. But more importantly for us, we are able to look at these parabolas in different ways. Like, where is their vertex? Well, only one of them has a vertex that is in the first, second, third, fourth quadrant, the third quadrant. That one's the only one with a vertex in the third quadrant. Okay, so we got to get to know these parabolas especially well. This is just parabolas. Don't let it confuse you that they're like some kind of weird squiggle shapes or something. That's not what's going on. They're just parabolas. But some are bigger and some are smaller. Makes kind of a cool picture. All right. Well, what are the upside down ones? The upside down ones had a negative in the front. Did you know that? The ones with the negative in the front are the ones that are upside down. All right. The ones that have a number here, that's called the y-intercept. Oh, so many little things that you need to know. Now we're going to go through a giant list of things you're supposed to know, and we'll see what you know and what you don't. But before we do that, we're about to find a few points on the graph of y equals x squared. Question? I'm listening.
So on like the page before when it was like which doesn't belong,
Yep.
was it 2 answers or which one?
There was an infinite number of answers. Each of them could be picked for a different reason. Like, how could I say Which one doesn't belong in here? And I could pick U. And then I could say, well, the reason is because her shirt color is different than everybody else's. Okay? Or I could have said U, because your glasses are different than everybody else's. Or I could have said, how is he one of 3 people? Well, there's 3 people wearing white for their shirt. He's one of the 3. Okay? So there's a lot of different ways to get the like answer to why is this one different. Okay, so back to this. If I put in -2, Lord, I hope you haven't forgot this over the break. You know where to put it? Put it in over here. And you put -2 here. And then what's y equal to? 4. Would you please find a few more points like that? Stick in -1, stick in 0. You gotta be good at finding points. This is one of the top 20 most important things. That's why it's on those basics tests that I give you. It's finding points that are on a graph. It's huge. So you stick in -1. What'd you get, Ian?
1.
Yep, because -1, when you square it, becomes +1. Good. How about 0? Ashlyn, what'd you get when you stuck in 0?
0.
Yep, 0 gives you 0. So then all of these things become points. -2,4 is a point. -1,1 is a point. 0,0 is a point. And of course, it'll make a parabola. Then they're going to ask you for the domain and range of it. So if I graph this thing, looks kind of like that. Now I got to do the domain and range. Ian, you drew my attention to you, so you get to answer this one. What's the domain of this thing? Hint, it's about the x's.
Negative infinity.
Very good. So that goes from -infinity this way to infinity that way. And how about the range of it? It's not quite as easy. Jack, you got this? Hint, it's about the y values, whereas domain was about the x values.
0, infinity.
0 to infinity is correct. Guys, remember domain and range? Because that's on the little, it's just a Schoology quiz for homework today, and one of them is domain and range. How are you supposed to type infinity? You would have put parentheses, 0, comma, INF, parentheses. That's how you would have entered that on Schoology, okay? INF for infinity. If it's negative infinity, just put a minus in front of infinity. Never put in spaces.
Do we put brackets on the 0?
Oh, you got me. Thank you for catching that. It's actually bracket 0 because it touches 0. Good call. I'm glad you said that because that would have been wrong on the Schoology quiz. A bracket is different than parentheses because it touches 0. Good catch. Okay. Increasing and decreasing intervals. I don't know if you remember this. Have you noticed that gas prices, for example, went way up and then they've come back down again? For a while, they were up at like $5 a gallon. Now they're down at like $3.50 again. Okay, so they went up a lot, then they come down, not all the way down again. They're still about $1 something more than they used to be, but there was increasing, then there was decreasing. And in the real world, it's never straight. It's kind of jaggedy like this line is. This is actually the price of Apple stock. And Apple stock had gone up a lot, and it reached its peak. Boy, would this be valuable information if you could go back in time. That from here to here, it rose a ton. Basically, that was from the beginning of the summer until the end of the summer. Apple stock went up like crazy. And then it went back down again. Then it went up, then it went back down. So that's increasing and decreasing. So how we describe that? Over a period of time, which is like x's. So that's like from here to here, it was going up. On this graph, would you agree that it is, if this is at 2, 1 right there, is it increasing all the time? Some people think it is because they see both arrows and they're like, yep, it's increasing all the time. Nope. Do you get this part is where it's increasing? The red part there? That's where it's increasing. At the beginning, it was going down. I know it's got an arrow on the end, but it was going down because we read from left to right. So do you get that this graph was sometimes decreasing and sometimes increasing? So the way you would say that again is it was decreasing from, well, where did it start decreasing? Well, I know where it stopped decreasing was at 2. That's supposed to be 2 because it says so right there. So it was from negative infinity until 2. And then in red, I'll say from 2 to infinity, it kept increasing. That's called the interval over which the function is increasing and decreasing. That's also on your next test.
Do we need brackets?
Little things. Good question about brackets. So then it would bring up a debate about whether or not it is increasing or decreasing at 2. And so I allow you to use brackets or not brackets because do you get the argument is at 2, is it actually increasing at 2? It's actually sitting still at 2, so it's not really increasing at 2. So parentheses are what usually you're going to put in. Usually they want parentheses. But I would allow brackets because I get the argument that without the 2 being there, you couldn't take the next step, which would be an increase. So bottom line, I'll accept parentheses or brackets on the increasing and decreasing intervals. But I'll tell you, it's parentheses usually. Okay, default to parentheses, like on a Schoology quiz, just use parentheses for increasing and decreasing intervals. This was the decreasing one, this is the increasing one. But I would have accepted parentheses, it's just that it probably isn't set that way because most books use parentheses. Brackets are okay, but I don't really want you to use brackets only because I'll have to change the Schoology quiz. But I will if I have to, which I probably will have to. Because somebody's going to use brackets because I said you could, and that's okay. I just want you to know that there's debate about whether or not it should be parentheses or brackets. Nobody ever debates about infinity, though. That's got to be parentheses because you cannot touch infinity. Okay, then here is a question. It's very similar to the one I gave you, except its vertex is not exactly where it was before. So would you please write down where was it increasing? Remember, just be nice to Mr. Server. Use parentheses because then I won't have to change the Schoology quiz. When's it increasing? When's it decreasing? Remember, this is about x's. It's the x values. It's like time. It's like when that stock was going up was from the beginning of the summer to the end of the summer. It's time, so it's x values. These are x values. So, in this point, which is 2 comma negative 1, you wouldn't even use the negative 1 ever because it's about the x values. So it was increasing from here over. So that's from 2 to infinity. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Cool, that's most of you. And it's decreasing during this part. And that's until it hit 2. Okay. Negative infinity until it hit 2. India, I need to stay focused on this. All right, I'm trying to help you do this, but you didn't write down the last 2 answers, so it made me nervous. All right, on to this one. The quadratics vocabulary, you're supposed to know what vertex is, the highest or the lowest spot. It's written like this. The x-intercepts, that's the places where it touches the x-axis. Okay. The y-intercept, that's where it hits the y-axis. Notice that it's x equals 0. I do this in pre-calc all the time. The x-intercept is where y is 0. The y-intercept is where x is 0. You see how they kind of like go opposite each other? If you're going to go to pre-calc next year, which the very top students, only the very top students in here are supposed to go to pre-calc next year, okay? And if you are feeling really crazy, like I'm an amazing student, I have gotten A's on everything you've ever given, Mr. Server, then you could consider taking honors pre-calc next year. It'll actually be an AP class next year. It'll be the first time it's ever been an AP class for pre-calc next year. But that's, again, if you're getting A's on every single test I ever give you, and you want to challenge beyond that, like it's going to be way harder than this class, then take honors pre-calc. But anyway, in pre-calc, I'll say this and you have to say the right thing back. The y-intercept is where, does anybody know the answer? X equals 0. And the x-intercept is where y equals 0. It comes up so much, I'm telling you, you'll see. All right, axis of symmetry goes right down the middle, goes through the vertex. See? It's that dotted line down there. It's the x of the vertex. So if the vertex is like this one, 1 comma negative 4, it's the x equals 1 part. That's the axis of symmetry. It's the axis of symmetry because it comes from the x number. Okay, so I think I've taught you most everything that you need to be able to do. So what's the vertex here? Well, you should be able to see it. What comma what? You're supposed to just naturally know what minimum and maximum are. In case that isn't clear, minimum means that it's low. Maximum means that it's high, the highest spot. So if I said, what's the minimum wage around here? Well, minimum wage is like the lowest legal wage they can pay you to work. But frankly, they can't get people to usually work for that. So usually the minimum wage might be like $8 an hour, but then most people actually make $10 an hour because like there wasn't enough people that were willing to work at minimum wage, like the lowest possible wage. That is the minimum on this parabola because it's the lowest spot. So it's a minimum. And it was at -2, -9. How many of you had that already? Cool. Then, axis of symmetry. Do you remember me telling you it was just this? So it's -2. You just write x equals -2. The axis of symmetry is the axis of symmetry. It will always be an x right there. It's very common for people to look at this graph and go, it's -2, but they don't say what it is. They just write -2. I can't give you credit unless you write x equals -2. That's the axis of symmetry. It's the axis of symmetry. Okay? I know where most of the common mistakes are, and I'm telling you, it happens all the time. So I'm going to say, the axis of symmetry is -2. Don't get wrong. It's the axis of symmetry. Okay. So, what are the x-intercepts? Do you know from looking at it? I know. I can see them. They're just jumping out at me. What are the x-intercepts?
-5, 1.
Yep. And I need to write them as a point. -5, and they're x-intercepts, so their y is 0. -5 comma 0. And what's this other one? 1 comma 0. Can't go to lunch yet. Very soon, though. Very soon. All right. And what is the y-intercept for this parabola? It's that red spot right there. That's the y-intercept. 0 comma -5. We'll just start this one. We can do the domain and we can do the range. As soon as we get done with that, it's lunchtime. So focus. Domain of this thing. Doesn't it go forever in both directions? So how do you write domain? Negative inf to inf. If you write it with a parenthesis or a squiggly symbol, it's fine, but it won't go on the Schoology quiz. And the range, what's the lowest this thing goes?
Infinity.
The range is really low, so negative inf, you were really close. Negative inf to what's the highest it goes?
8.
And we're at lunchtime. Okay, so we're back from lunch, and we had just left when we figured out the domain of this thing, which goes this way to this way, was -infinity to +infinity. Then the range, which goes like from down low to up high, and that was -infinity down here up to the height of 8. That's why we had that. Increasing interval. Everybody take a second, and obviously this thing increases. As you read from left to right, this is the part that's increasing. So how do you say that? Well, it starts infinitely over there. -infinity to, and I hope you know that range, or sorry, increasing and decreasing intervals is about x. These are about x values, both this one and this one. Would you please try to figure out the increasing and decreasing interval? I'll pause for a second while you try this one. Okay, let's see if you did it right. The increasing interval was that black part when I kind of made like a stair step thing on it. That was from negative infinity until the x value here. I get it if you said 8, but you were wrong. The x value was 4. It was increasing until 4. And then it went decreased from 4 until when did it stop decreasing? It never stopped. Infinity. You can use I on F, or you can use that little sideways 8 thing. The vertex means this spot right here, and hopefully by now you know that that's the vertex, so it's at 4, 8. That's pretty easy. Is it a min or a max? Say it if you know it. Max is correct. The axis of symmetry is the axis of symmetry. So you say x equals 4 for the axis of symmetry. The x-intercepts are where it touches the x-axis. I can see them here. They didn't label them, but I can kind of figure it out. That must be 1, and that must be 7. So 1 and 7. Now, if you wanted to be extra careful on this, the x-intercept is where y equals 0. Put comma 0, because you're saying then that you know it's actually 7, 0. Because x-intercepts are where y is 0, and y-intercepts are where x is 0. 0 comma something. All right, and the y-intercept on this thing, oh, there's only one y-intercept, Mr. Server. There always is only one y, because otherwise it wouldn't pass a vertical line test. If there was 2 y-intercepts, it can't be. So it's at -8, and there can't be 2 y-intercepts, Mr. Server. Okay. All right, I think you get. So let's get to your Schoology quiz. It's a fairly small number of problems. As long as you get these like 7 easy concepts, then it shouldn't be that bad. Look at the Schoology quiz. Number 1 has got several blanks. And I'm going to ask somebody to read me question 1 in just a second, so everybody please get there. All I'm asking is that you read it to me. Ashlyn, can you tell me number 1's first question? There's like a little blank. X-intercepts. All right. Does it say how to give them? Does it say like to have a point, like something comma something? All right, then I don't even know how to give it. Because if the x-intercepts were like 8 and 7, I don't know if I should say x-intercepts are where y is 0. I don't know if they mean like this, or if they just want me to write an 8. If they want me to say x equals 8. Let me just see if it gives you any hint. It does not. So I'm going to have to look it up. I'm going to pause for a second and see what the key says about how to write that. Because there's 3 ways that would all kind of be right. So give me a second and I'll look it up. You guys try to answer the other questions. So I looked it up, and on the first question where they ask for the x-intercepts and the y-intercepts, they want points like this. And that was not clear. But now if you refresh your iPad, it'll show you how it should look. Is there any others you want to ask about before I end the video? And remember, if I didn't say this on the video already, I made the last one worth 0 points, so it won't hurt you if you skipped the last question, number 5. That'll save you a bunch of time. That's like 20% off. Just do the first 4. Okay, that's all I have for you for today.